The good thing about Canada being behind is the new stuff that's coming out is in some ways way better than what they have in the US. Brand spanking new technology, faster to build on, more modern, easier to integrate. What we're also seeing is some next level stuff in terms of our artificial intelligence.
Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds. And for my entire career, it's been my mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to hear from the visionaries, from the leaders, from the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, I'm going to leave you with at least one winnable idea that you can start implementing right away. Let's turn the page on building a better business. Welcome to the next episode of Turning the Page. I'm your host, Chris Reynolds, and I have a very special guest today, Jason Pereira, who's built a very successful practice in the Toronto area, host of his own podcast. In fact, he has two podcasts, the FinTech Impact, which has been great, and the Financial Planning for Canadian Business Owners. I've known Jason, how long have we known? Almost 20 years, I'm going to say, maybe even longer.
Yeah, pretty close.
All from the early days of IPC. I met Jason and his partner, James. They came over, I believe, in an acquisition that we did. And from there, they have built quite the great business. Jason is well known in the technology space. He does a series of podcasts himself. And today, we're going to ask him all about those trends. So welcome, Jason.
It's a pleasure, Chris.
So, Jason, here's always the first question everyone gets. Tell us about your journey. How'd you get here? How'd you build your business to where it is today? And, maybe some of the obstacles along the way.
Fair enough. I'll give you the origin story, then I'll fast forward to the relevant part with Woodgate. So when I was in high school in my second last year, because we had 13 years, we had 13 grades back then, I realized I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I didn't want to go to university, blow a bunch of money, and be unemployable or work in something that was going to make no money. So as an 18-year-old boy, I walked into a co-op department and say, here's things I'm interested in. And lo and behold, money in the stock market was one of them. Shocking for an 18-year-old boy. So I got placed downtown Toronto with one of the largest brokers in the country. And that co-op position turned into a summer job, turned into come back whenever you want. And it was a great learning experience because I got to do a little bit of everything. But I also became disgusted with what I saw as status quo of the industry. No metrics for client success. All the metrics were around advisor production. And I was doing these things called financial plans, even though I wasn't qualified for it, that when I was like, wait a sec, if I do this tiny little thing, oh my God, the needle moves. And this is so much more relevant than him picking 5-star funds. Like I couldn't see the disconnect and how these things just ended up in drawers. So when I left, I was determined to basically, to put that into play. And what happened was I had one previous company with a senior partner. That one we parted ways, and then James and myself started Woodgate, and we were growing at a very, very quick clip. We got approached to merge into a larger firm. Now this took a bit of a deviation because that firm had a huge group retirement business, and that was not my core niche. So we took a book that was combined about 125 million, and I kid you not, 1,100 households. And over time, through sales and through bringing in new business, got that down to about 230 households and about 230 million. So it was a long journey, and that was really by focusing on what we believed was the ultimate way to create a win-win relationship between clients. It was planning centricity. Every relationship we have starts off with a financial plan and an IPS before we even transfer over the money. So we literally charge them a first-year onboarding fee to do a very comprehensive financial plan, which quite literally have won international awards for the level of stuff that we do. And basically make sure that we are putting the horse before the cart. Because when you think about this, the entire industry, and maybe people can disagree with me all they want on this one, but if you're not taking the time to diagnose the patient before you perform surgery, that's called malpractice. And all too often in this industry, it's send me the money let me set up your portfolio, then I'll do the financial plan. But wait a minute, the financial plan is the discovery piece where you determine everything you should know before you actually do the planning. So that's been it. So, how we built it, it's been first and foremost client referral, which eventually turned into people in the industry recognizing us for what we were doing. Wholesalers, people at head office, I will nudge linking. So the greatest compliment to me is when people who've seen a lot of advisory practices, consultants, lawyers, wholesalers, accountants, whatever it is, turn around and start referring us business because they're like, okay, no, of all the people I've seen, you're the ones I'm going to send business to. So that was the next thing. I'd say as my public profile within the industry evolved through writing and podcasting and whatever else, other advisors send me business. There are times when, we really focus, my core niche is really focusing in on complex corporate cases and cross-border. So there's a lot of like tax complexity to what I do. And I've had many advisors basically say, I landed this prospect. This is beyond my depth. Like, just take care of them, which I always compliment them because frankly, that's the responsible thing to do. And now I'd say it's even evolved into, the writings and the social media stuff is bringing in general public. So it's been a long reputation building advocacy of financial planning first journey that's led us to where we are today.
Right. And you've always been known to, focus on that client central type of planning first. And I think that's important. And I think it's a key differentiator in the market as much as it, theoretically should not be. Doing a financial plan should be the primary thing that everyone focuses on. You'd be surprised that people generally move to the investment side way before that they do the actual, to your point, the diagnostic on what that client needs.
I'll go one better. Most of the industry treats it like a checkbox, right? You can almost always tell what they care about because first off, again, they're putting investments first. Secondly, they'll say they do financial planning, but it's typically someone on a team who does it for an entire branch. That plan is basically delivered and then disappears into a drawer and never to be seen again. So what most advisors out there who claim they do financial planning are doing is checking the box. And it's funny because I've actually had conversations with periodicals that rank advisors who are like, oh no, we rank them based on their service offering. And I'm like, I can disprove their service offering with basic math.
Right.
And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, this is what they're claiming they're doing, right? The benchmark, plug Michael Kitces' website here. He's benchmarked financial planning engagements start to finish at 10 hours on average is the median time. Then you have the entire experience with delivering comprehensive planning, which is roughly about 34 hours to go start to finish through one cycle, right? Basic math. You take the number of households that they have and you divide that by the number of client management people, so people who are actually managing the relationship, and see if that actually works out to a number that corresponds with the number of hours in the year that they can service people. And the answer is it never does. The reality is if you have more than 100 households, there's no way you can deliver this kind of service. Like you're going to break.
Absolutely. And one of the things that certainly helps with efficiency, and one of the things that I know that you're certainly an advocate of, is the use of technology in wealth management. The use of technology, gives us way more leverage in what we do. It gives us way more scalability. So maybe talk about some of the uses of technology in your own practice and what you've seen as a result and how that's benefited clients.
Well, let's just set this table by saying we all use technology, whether people say they love it or hate it. Because at the end of the day, even if you say you hate it, you still turn on your TV, you still have your cell phone, you still drive a car, right? So we're just determining what level of technology you're comfortable with is what it really comes down to. So basically, and I don't know who said it, but there was a famous saying that in the future, there'll only be two types of companies, tech companies and dead ones. And that is reinforced in my life more and more every day, right? Like, we had a meeting not that long ago and we talked about the pains of my business and how certain technologies, if deployed properly, would eliminate the need for that pain, not entire full-time equivalent hour bodies to do it, right? So the reality is that there is, I've always been a technophile, so it's been easy for me, but there is pretty much, if you're feeling pain in your business somewhere, I can pretty much promise you someone else has felt that pain and come up with a solution. Now, maybe it's not the perfect exact thing you want, right? And that gets in the way of people adopting this stuff or fear of change. But the reality is that there are so many tiny ways to improve your business and your practice that frankly it's mind blowing. So simple examples of what we've done that no one should be afraid of. At one point, one of my assistants said that she was spending about 75 to 80% of the time booking, rebooking, and confirming client meetings because we had 3 advisors meeting with people at the time. I heard that and I was like, okay, that's coming to a quick end because I did not realize that and I was already planning on doing something else. Did some research, looked at different calendar booking softwares out there. Just about everybody's seen these. You get a link, you go to a website, the person's face is there. Here's their calendar, pick the time, enter your name, boom. And it's all booked, all the appointments set up, and the reminders all flow in. So, kid you not, you can probably get that software for, some of them, I've seen some basic free ones, but you're talking somewhere between $0 to $80 a month, right? So let's call it an average 35. Okay? We put that in place for 3 advisors, less than $1,000 or less than $1,200 to spend a year to do that. And the result, she went from 70 to 80 down to about 10% of her time doing that because we still have the seniors who don't have computers, which is fine, not a problem. And so think about the productivity gains. I gained almost the equivalent of a full human being's time to work in my business elsewhere. And the number of people forgetting they had an appointment fell to 0 because reminders came out and we had them come out 1 week before, 1 day before, day of, and they would get texted an hour before. No one missed anything. And if they needed to rebook, click a link, boom, didn't take any of her time. So that's always kind of like the one I use as an example because it's a very material change. And it's one that basically no one should be afraid of. Like legitimately, no one should be afraid of. Right? So, but that's just a small example. The reality is that there are tons of consumer softwares, whether it be for gathering data for financial plans or document signatures we've all discovered in the world of COVID, right? My office was almost fully remote enabled pre-COVID. The last shoe to drop was I hadn't moved our phone system to the cloud, and I was already planning that 2 months later. So I just had to fast forward that. So there's 0 reason, quite honestly, these days that if clients are willing to not have to meet in person in this business, you can't work remotely fully. So it is. And frankly, so I would say this much. I can give you tons of examples, but I think the most useful tip I can give you is I maintain a directory of technologies that advisors can use to better their practice. And that's on my separate branded website, jasonpereira.ca. You go to research, there's a directory there of everything from calendar booking systems to calendar systems to portfolio management, you name it, all there. And if you feel pain in one area of your practice, just start Googling because there is a solution.
There's always a solution. Actually, yeah, I say that quite often. Google's your friend. If you don't know how to do something, Google's your friend. You can always find something there.
I don't understand people who say, I don't know where to start. Like, what do you mean you don't know where to start?
You can always start with Google. What are some of the big trends? I know you see some of the trends in the U.S., see some of the emerging technology trends, but just wealth management trends in general that you're seeing, and that you think that probably will at some point be applicable in the Canadian marketplace. What are some of the major ones? So
it's been said that Canada is 20 years behind the U.S. In many ways we are, but in some ways we're ahead. But I'll expand it beyond the U.S. I mean, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned by different regions. When it comes to regulation of this industry, Australia is far ahead. UK is a close second. When it comes to regulation of digital privacy and the online realm, Europe is ahead by a long shot. And when it comes to technology within the financial industry, the U.S. is definitely ahead. And the trend is that the Americans saw the proliferation of advisor-facing technology for a period of 15 to 20 years. So every little solution, you have multiple solutions for an advisor-centric CRM. You have multiple solutions for, actually, quite honestly, anything. Again, going back to Kitsis, he maintains a FinTech directory that is just at the current rate of expansion, will fill the entire universe in about 5 years. The point is that you have multiple choices for anything or any need you have specifically designed for advisors. We don't have, that doesn't really exist elsewhere in the world. We can use some of that stuff in Canada, but not everywhere. So they had that. But what they're finding now, what's the core of a lot of the conversations is like, okay, great. We now have that. But we've drifted away from the concept of the core is the service offering of the client to the client. Right. And I'd say the bigger trend I see down there, when I encourage everyone here when building a practice, is, it's and in contrast to Canada, the US, you can see this every day, is niche, is building a niche service offering. And, in Canada, I typically, when people come to me and say, I want some guidance on how to build my practice, my first question is, well, define your target client. Well, I deal with business owners, executives, and high net worth families. My response is, thank you for telling me you deal with people with money.
Right. Anyone who has money.
Exactly. So what do you do separate for each of those groups? And the answer is typically dumbfounded nothing. Like there is no separation of services. So you're just telling people that I want your money. You're not telling them what you're going to do for them. And again, less of a mature market in Canada. So, I think you can get away with that and still be relatively successful. But if you be wildly successful, it's different. And you look at the US, I kid you not, some of the examples I've seen are incredible. Like a guy who basically specializes around big game fishermen. Like these guys win contests and they get handed a $500,000 check and endorsement deals. And this guy grew up in that environment. So he understands what a good contract looks like. He knows what the prevalence of winning is going to be like for these guys. So he speaks their language. Do you think they go to anyone else? No.
Who would?
Why would you? Right? I've seen websites for advisors designed specifically around NFL players. First thing on the site it says is that something like 50% of all NFL players suffer financial difficulty inside of 2 years of leaving the league. Do you think you just hit the nail on the head of what these guys are worried about? Right? So the more you can speak to someone's actual need, the more valuable it is. So what you're finding is that in the US, they went through this transition of technology, which is great. And now they're going more towards a focusing on how do I be not all things to all people, but everything to one person, right? In Canada, we are still on this early stage and we need to get the technology set up, but that doesn't mean you can't do the niching, right? So I would encourage that trend to accelerate in Canada because I think that's how you provide deep value to consumers. And for those of you worried about, margin compression, guess what? There's no margin compression in the US. Why? Because people are finding ways to deliver value. So the technology side, what are we missing here? We're a smaller market. We don't have the advisor-specific solutions. But what we are seeing in trends now is we're starting to see the good thing about Canada being behind is the new stuff that's coming out is in some ways way better than what they have in the US. Faster to build, like brand spanking new technology, faster to build on, more modern, easier to integrate. So you're starting to see a number of best-in-class platforms starting to come out, or what can be best-in-class platforms starting to come out that are integrating with each other, which finally will start to have data flowing between these things properly. And really, that's the start of it. Because what we're also seeing is some next level stuff in terms of our artificial intelligence. Right? We're starting to see AI thrown at these processes. Again, back to that entire median time for a financial plan to be generated at 10 hours. Call out the Conquest, built in Canada, and now going everywhere in the world that we use at IPC. Like, legitimately, if you nail your process down and can onboard the data for that client, that 10 hours can be truncated to half to less than half. Like literally the amount of productivity savings there is incredible. And to produce a plan that no human being ever could because of the number of variables it tests, it's insane. So what am I seeing? All the heavy lifting of this business over the next, knock on wood, I'm probably underestimating it, over the next 5 years, all the things that people said, well, this is what I get paid for. I got to produce all this paperwork to sign up your accounts. I got to produce all these reports. I got to do all this heavy admin work is going to be automated and made push button in many ways, right? Won't be perfect. It'll never be, I'll never have to touch it. I'll never need an admin system. It's not going to be that.
No.
But it will be streamlined to the point where it frees up our time. Now, the big misnomer here, the engineers looking at this industry say, oh, that's great. You'll be able to service more clients. No, you won't.
No.
cognitively. No one wants a relationship where client calls the advisor. Advisor has to look up the name and say, hold on a second, let me put you on hold while I look up your case and read. Like that's that's when I call an anonymous call center, right? They want someone that when I pick up the phone, like, hey, how's it going? Oh, did you get over the flu last week? Okay, great. Hey, what do you mean your kid's got something that happened to your kid, right? Like they want to be able to pick up a phone with someone who understands their life start to finish. So human cognitive limitations, something called the Dunbar number. You can manage somewhere between 100 to 200 relationships, averaging 150. Subtract out friends and family, you're still back at 100. So what this will do is will enable us to stop focusing on just the product distribution and the financial planning. It will be allowing us to expand upon that relationship and provide greater service and greater depth of understanding. And that's what we're seeing.
I love it. And speaking of automation, and I'll take this one, is you've recently moved your practice to more of a PM type of platform. So you can do more discretionary type of management, and it makes it so much more efficient. And what we call here at IPC our one platform. Maybe talk a little bit about why make that move as an advisor and what it's done for your clients.
Yeah, well, I mean, both the operational efficiency standpoint conversation, but also like, so there's that, there's the ideally, how should this practice work? And then there's the technology, because this is also partially a technology story.
Right. It's a combination of all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So when, again, best practice, how should someone run their practice, right? In terms of making recommendations on investments. Well, you should basically have your different allocations that you're going to recommend. And you should have for every possible use case, a solution, right? So if I have accounts under $50,000, this is my solution for all of those different portfolios. If I have, accounts over that, here's what it is. If I'm doing ESG investing, what am I using in those different portfolios? And whatever number of use cases you can have, it can be 1 or it can be 20, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is that in practice, 2 clients who don't know each other, with the same life situation, the same goals, relatively the same financial circumstances, and the same risk tolerance, should basically be slotted into the exact same portfolio. Like that's the way it should work. It's logic, right? Now, here's the problem. And I know, Chris, knowing you for years, you've always ranted about the biggest problem in the dealership is the number of fund codes you got to deal with, which is again, exponential number every year.
Right.
Part of the problem for that is the old-fashioned way of doing things, because the industry looked at us as salespeople, right? So I have to go sell you a product, but then I have to, if I want to make a change to that product, I have to go back and say, I want to change your identical portfolio, different provider. I want to change this. You need to give me permission. And then for everybody else, like Chris, I have to go and have that conversation one by one.
Over and over and over and over again. Yeah.
It just makes us repetitive. Again, it actually creates, it reinforces the belief that we are salespeople, right? Because we're having to have a sales conversation. Whereas the alternative is, hey, basically, I am being authorized now. You're giving me authorization to basically stay within these kind of risk goalposts, all right? I'm a fiduciary now. I can make changes on your behalf with discretion, but they absolutely have to be in your best interest, and I have to back that up. And instead of going to all 30 to 40 Chris's to make the change of that one fund, I basically push a few buttons, submit, and it's taking care of the next step. So the operational savings, don't get me wrong, it's painful to repaper people and get them on that platform.
Sure, getting them there is always a journey, sir.
Well, I mean, even think about the basic stuff. Like people would send us cash to their account and they wouldn't tell us that they were just wiring money into their taxable account. Okay, great. It's here now. Hey, thanks. I got that money you sent. Can I invest it now? Like right. That's the kind of ridiculous conversation I had to have, as opposed to push button invest, right? So the operational efficiencies on the management of the portfolio side are just night and day. Like it is the near utopian version of what portfolio management should be. And again, that is all because the investment's been made in the right modern systems to basically be able to just make one choice, one decision, and have that all push and flow through within 24 hours.
Yeah. No, everyone who has moved there basically comments on the same thing. It's much better for the client. It helps you establish your demographic and what you're going, the solutions for those demographics, and automate all that administration.
Well, think about the ethical issue to some degree. Okay, so here's the issue. And this is the classic thing. You need to make a portfolio change. You have a list of clients. who do you call first?
Right. And who do you call last?
Exactly. And notoriously, unfortunately, in this industry, if I was to run an academic study, I can pretty much bet you it would be largest client to smallest client, right? That is not treating people fairly and equitably, right? So, I mean, our previous process was, look, we have a regular cycle of communicating with clients. It will be in their next meeting. That is the fairest way we can do things. We're not going to have people jump the line. It is when we meet with you next, right? That was our previous answer. But I acknowledge it was less than perfect. This entire ability to treat everybody equally is far more just.
Absolutely. And I do think it's the future. So let's move into something I do here. It's called rapid fire. I get to ask you a whole bunch of questions and you can answer them as quickly as possible. So first question, what is it you love to do most and why?
In this business or in general?
Well, I'm going to stick with this business right now.
Okay, let's stick with this business. One word, one sentence. Okay, very simply, getting to see my clients succeed. That's what drives me.
I think that's great. How about what was on the same topic, what has been the most meaningful client interaction you've had in your career? One that really just pops into your head that you said, man, I made a difference.
There's some very emotional answers to that question. I can't point to one. There have been many times where a horrific life event happened to a client, and I was able to better the situation by alleviating concern, whether that be rushing to their side to deal with the immediate issue or taking whatever I could off their plate so they could focus on what the horrific issue was. And, those get me choked up. It's, that's the kind of quote unquote advisor insurance I refer to that exists in the business that you hope it never happens to you. But if you have someone who's going to be there for you like that time, it's, personally, I hope once I retire, I hope I have that kind of advisor.
Absolutely. And as I said, that's what makes this business all worthwhile. And the last question, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want other people, when you decide to retire and ride off into the sunset or whatever euphemism we use, what do you want to be remembered for?
Depends on who we're talking about. So amongst my clients, someone who helped them live the best version of their lives. Amongst the industry, someone who, depending on how you look at it, annoyingly pushed everyone to be better. And for everyone I help make better, I help make the client's lives better. That's a massive expansion effect there.
Yeah, I love it, Jason. Well, and then another part that we do here is what we call my rant. And you've probably been a victim of my rant over the years. But the rant on this particular one, and one that really comes to mind, and it's something I say all the time, and it's a lesson I learned early, is to get value, you have to create value. And that value comes from a lot of different areas. And to your point, who can you create value to? The niche markets you were talking about. How can you create more value for them? In other words, free up time utilizing technology and other areas where you can get more leverage so that you can spend more time creating value for a certain set of clients. And if you do that consistently, you'll create value for yourself. So Jason, anything to add?
Yes, and some of them I'm stealing from you. So we are both a fan of the Clayton Christensen saying of people do not buy 3/4-inch drill bits, they buy 3/4-inch holes. All too often in this industry, we are told to sell or taught to sell and spend so much time on the drill bit that we forget that the end story is not the fact that we sold an ETF or a mutual fund or all this other stuff because that's how we get compensated. It's because we help them actualize their life. And if you really want to service people, and especially on this niche side, and I'll quote my buddy Dennis Mosley Williams, whose favorite saying on this is niche, weird. Figure out a general population get a service, figure out the subset of that, figure out the one thing that's weird between them all, because that's when you can speak to that group, you are forever going to be indispensable to them. And the only way you truly deliver value is not by asking what product do they need. It's what are the common problems that these people face in their lives and stresses. And even if it's outside of money, how do I help improve that part of their existence?
Absolutely. If you can solve someone's problem, you have yourself a client. Jason, as always, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us here on Turning the Page, and look forward to many chats in the future. Thank you. So if you've liked what you've heard today, do us a favor and hit subscribe. That way you'll find another episode and another actionable takeaway on how to keep building a better business.